Sheila, today happens to be my mom's birthday. She would have been
Oh my
79.
gosh.
So I think about my mom often, of course. But I
Mhm.
found myself thinking about, all the happy moments and funny moments, which is what I think about most. But in light of this conversation today, I was thinking about some of the moments that she and I found ourselves in. Um, when we were out in public, and just the my words, but the fight or flight sort of response that I
Yeah.
experienced when something inappropriate was going on, like the day that I was having lunch with her at her memory care community, and I look over and she's in a full on makeout with one of her fellow residents at the table, right? So,
Mhm.
my
So
feeling
hard.
in that moment that sticks with me, right?
Yeah.
And there's no easy solution to these situations, but I think there are some little things that we can be doing to hopefully make them just a little bit, even a smidge easier. That's a
Mhm.
win. So
Yeah.
that's what we're here to talk about today. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Yep, I think this is gonna help a lot of people.
Hope so. Hope so. So, I mean, what's your sort of and I know you're a former caregiver yourself as well, but what's your opening take, I guess, on this topic of when we find ourselves in an inappropriate situation or experience witnessing inappropriate behavior, I should say, out in public.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different emotions that come up. There's embarrassment, but you're also trying to balance that with, you're protecting your mom. Like, you want to maintain her dignity. You don't want to embarrass her either. And then it's just you're wondering what people are saying or thinking. And just to know that this is depending on what the situation is, it's a loss of filters. It's all of a sudden someone you're caring for acting in ways that are not expected or socially acceptable. And it's just tough. It's really tough.
That is for sure. And you're hitting on something interesting there, which is there's sort of, I guess, if we step back and think about inappropriate behavior, like there's all sorts of different types, right? There's different buckets. And you were just kind of hitting on a couple, right? There's the lack of filter was a big one. Again, my mom was living with Alzheimer's disease and my father-in-law with Lewy body dementia. My father-in-law in particular, just filter was gone. Some of the stuff he would
Yeah.
say was, a lot of time it was, well, just those moments where a comment's made and you can't unring that bell, right? When it's
That's right. Good
inside
way
the
to
four walls at home, it's one thing, but when it's out in public, it's another. But so that's one. But there's things around related to intimacy, like the example I was talking about, the story I was sharing with my mom. There's I've heard removal of clothes just at the wrong
Yep.
time, going to the bathroom in the wrong spot. All there's all sorts of different buckets, right? So, and they're all a little bit different, and in terms of um how you try and protect yourself against them.
Yeah, and some of them are really subtle. I mean, you're bringing some sort of overt things, the sexual connotations, or if someone's taking off their clothes, or but then there's real subtle ones too. It's like getting just a little bit too close to a stranger, or taking some food off of someone else's plate, or just making inappropriate comments about people passing by and they could hear her, which just leads to just like, "Oh, this is not what she would normally do, or certainly not anything I wanna be associated with." So, it runs the full gamut from being subtle to super overt, and, there's ways to handle all of them.
Yeah, and there's it's a good point on the subtle, all sorts of shapes and forms, I guess they come in. But something else you just sparked in another thought you just sparked for me is there's this sort of well, for me anyway, it was mostly just like the fear of it and my reaction and oh my gosh, what am I gonna say? What are these people thinking? I think you used those words, and like that's exactly how I was feeling, right?
Yeah.
When it would happen, but also like if I were trying to take mom out as an example, which was generally a good thing. Like we tried to do that for as long as we could, but I can just still so vividly feel the fear that I felt about, well, what if this happens or that or etc. So
Right.
like it's such a fine line to be balancing. The alternative is sort of a path towards isolation. If we're
That's
so afraid or paralyzed by this fear of something inappropriate happening that we won't go out, well, that's
that's
not the
big one
best
for
either, right?
yeah, for either one of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just a tough situation. So one other piece of housekeeping that I forgot to mention, please join the conversation, the chat console and the QA down at the bottom. But any other thoughts before we get into some of these tips, some of these things that are small little things that we can be doing to hopefully avoid these situations or mitigate them, mitigate the impact of them on us, on our loved one.
Well, I think we'll get into some of those specific tips, but it's difficult because I think sometimes things come up in the most opportune times. It's like, why are they bringing out their profanity in church? Like, of all places, you know? So it's a matter of preparing, and we'll go over some of these tips and then understanding what to do, no matter if they're just with you or if they're just with a neighbor or if they're in a formal situation like a ceremony or a church situation.
Okay, so let's get into the tips, and I'm just a little bit of a confession here. The first one we had on the list, and this sort of ties in. This is really about helping the caregiver. Any
Mhm.
caregivers out there who are like I was, where I was just, frankly, I guess I was focused on me. Like my main stressor about this was how I would react, what others would think of me. Are they thinking like, oh, geez, I'm not, caring for my mom? What would they think of her? Just that aspect of it. So this first tip is really getting at, it's more of a little, just a tiny little tool to help me sort of manage that, which was just really drilling home to myself that it was my mom's condition. It wasn't her, right? Like she wasn't choosing to say these things or do this or do that, right? Like she wasn't choosing to do this in public. Mom before Alzheimer's disease would have never done that,
Of
right?
course
Like,
not.
but that's a hard thing to actually make productive, like, because it's just, it's words, right? It's not her, it's
Right.
it's her condition. But it actually, the more I sort of drilled it into myself, it gave me it provided a little bit of insulation, I guess, just emotionally for me in those moments. It was like almost like a grounding
That's
technique
exactly
in
it.
some ways.
It's almost like a mantra, and I think I'm gonna say this again and again as typically do, is it's reframing it. So, you're reframing the situation, and if you can start believing that by realizing that it's the condition and not your mom, you're doing a lot of things. There's this underlying side effects of this. You're protecting the relationship, you're reducing your own stress or guilt, you're actually improving your caregiver effectiveness, you're modeling this for other people who may be watching, your siblings, your kids, and they're like, "Oh, wow. So I can act the same way." And you're preserving your own mental health. So there's all these wonderful things that come out of stopping and realizing it's the condition. It's not mom.
I really appreciate the way you put that because, like we talk about often in these situations or in these conversations, this is all such a tangled web of emotion.
Yeah.
And I, I like my natural reaction was one of anger often.
Mhm.
I would get mad at my mother if she was doing something that was inappropriate. And this sort of mantra, let's call it, helped me. Well, I would get mad and then I'd feel really guilty for getting mad. Not to mention the fact that I was mad would impact me being maybe less like effective as than I could be in diffusing the situation. So it's all such a tangled web. But the big thing in terms of me, my health and well-being and effectiveness as a caregiver, this really helped me sort of dull that feeling of anger that I would get in those moments. It helped me cut through that and see the situation for what it was,
Mhm.
which was just going with the example of my mom, a woman who is having a hard time because of her
Absolutely.
Alzheimer's disease. Like that's boil it all down. That's the situation. So, I might be doing the same thing if I had Alzheimer's disease the way she did at that moment, right? Where she was in her progression. So that's the first one. Okay. And you're probably going to see a theme here that is simplicity, honestly, because like we said at the top, and we say often, unfortunately, there is no magic wand for us to just be like, yeah, we're now immune to, from being in these situations. It just doesn't work like that,
Right.
as much as I wish it did. But the second is breathing, which is sneaky, sneaky, sneaky important. And I'm talking about in these situations because I mentioned the fight or flight sort of feeling reaction that I had. Like again, it's trying to just like cut through, like, block out all of that noise and, like, be present in the moment, see it for what it is, and sort of act accordingly. And breathing, like, couple deep breaths or whatever works for you or worked, it just really was helpful for me. And what's your take on that tip?
Well, there's a reason also. I mean, sometimes people hear this, like, "Oh my gosh, you're telling me to breathe, whatever." But once again, there's tremendous side effects. Breathing happens naturally, but it also happens on purpose. You can breathe on purpose. And this is what we're talking about. Breathing directly influences your body's stress system, so your stress response system. So it interrupts the feedback cycle that you're of embarrassment, of guilt, of stress. And when you go into a specific kind of breathing, and I'm going to tell you that the exhale really matters, it activates part of your nervous system that slows your heart rate. It balances things out. It is designed to work in that way. So, regardless of what you think, breathing will change the way that your body reacts and feels. So, it's not just words.
I love it. I appreciate that validation. Like, is this something you can practice?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could just give you a quick tip now. I talked about the exhale mattering. And what I mean by that, if you were to try to inhale quietly and you try to do it through your nose and maybe count to 4, and then you're going to exhale through your mouth with a longer amount of time, say 7. It doesn't have to be 7 seconds. It's just count to 4 on the in, count to 7 on the out, and repeat that a few times. What you're doing is telling your body that things are okay, that everything's all right. You're on your way back down to balance by increasing the length of that exhale. Simple.
Love it. Love it. And that's something, so as I'm listening to you talk there, so that's something anyone could, and whether we're caregiving or not, right? Like, this is a life skill, right?
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
but something we could practice in just quiet time. But it's also, if I were just teleported back to the middle of my caregiving days, and so a lot of our inappropriate moments with my mom and I happened in the thrift store. Like, that was one of our main activities. She
Hmm.
loved going thrifting, always did. So, I would take her thrifting. Anyway, before we get out of the car, pull into the parking lot, and before we get out of the car, I could just do what you just described, right? To,
Yeah.
like, proactively sort of, lack of a better way to put it, I guess, get ahead of it, right?
Yep.
And then, but that's also sort of practice slash building a habit so that, when mom gets in an argument because the clerk in the thrift store is telling her not to touch something, I can enact that breathing to sort of slow my heart rate, keep me grounded a little bit, and be
Yep.
able to work through the situation.
Yeah, the more you practice it proactively, the more likely it is that you'll go to it as a tool in the moment. So, absolutely.
Love it. Okay. So let's move on. So this is something that was this next tip, something super important for my family's life and my life as a caregiver, as dementia caregivers, but important across the board. And this is, trying, if we can be grounded, if we can do the things that we've talked about so far, right? So that, we're not having that sort of fight or flight experience. Like, we're present, we're seeing the situation for what it is. If we can assess their needs, right? Because generally, this is, like, there's something else going on, right? There could be something. Often there could be something else going on. Maybe they're
Yes.
hungry. Maybe they need to go to the restroom. Whatever it is, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, so what are your thoughts slash ideas for
Well,
assessing
that's
needs in the moment here?
exactly right. That typically their words, their actions, how they're responding to something can be a way to communicate a basic need. So it's an attempt to express some underlying discomfort, and they're not able to say the word or act in a way that is typical or what you would consider to be normal. So whatever's happening, and like you said, it could be they're hungry, they're thirsty. Sometimes, people are very upset when people are taking clothes off. They might be hot, or that might be their signal that they have to use the restroom and they just don't know how to say it or act it out. So they're just going to use their body in any way that feels natural to them. So it's important to think about what possibly could be happening underneath, and what just happened? Or has she been to the restroom lately? Or have we eaten recently? Those kinds of things.
And what about in a situation where this is still applies, right? So we're dementia situation, communication was a challenge for my mom. So I totally track with everything you're saying. But then with situations where maybe the person that you're caring for doesn't really have communication challenges, right?
Mhm.
Like they're able to effectively articulate, what's going on. It still applies then, right? Because somebody could be
Yeah.
acting out, they might be uncomfortable, not wanting to say it, they might be angry.
Angry, frustrated
Yeah.
at the situation, at their limitations, whatever it is.
Hmm.
It's just an expression of something that's underneath, and
Hmm.
it's up to us to figure out what that is.
Yeah, yeah. And same with like just the example I threw out before, or at the beginning around, my mom having a kissing session with one of her friends at the lunch table in the memory in her memory. Same thing, right? It applies in that situation.
Same thing, Matt.
Yeah.
It could be her, feeling that she could use a hug, or she just needs some human touch or a connection with someone. That's the way it comes out.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
can be terribly embarrassing, but there's ways to handle it in the moment and prepare ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of which is the next tip, which is around redirecting. So what are I mean, there's an art to redirecting.
Yeah. I think the first thing is to stay calm, try not to overreact or be, alarmed at it. I would use their name, maybe gently touch them on the shoulder, say, "Hey, let's go look at this." Or, "Would you do me a favor and hold on to this?" If they're taking clothes off or something, "Let's go to the restroom so I could fix that." Or even just like if there's you could offer a sweater or a jacket and say, "Hey, let's try this instead." So you're lowering your voice, you're saying their name, you're encouraging them to go do something different. And typically, people will get distracted and go ahead and do that. Now, the other thing I would say is for redirecting the situation, if there's people gathering around and you're wondering what to say, you could say, "This is a medical issue. Would you please give us some space?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Simple, everybody will understand that.
Yeah, and I love so that actually is a beautiful segue into the next tip, which is around is another one that goes back to a tool for us as caregivers to use and sort of, in my words, sort of block out the noise of, the embarrassment or just the heightened emotions we might be feeling in that moment. But it's, this idea of having some sort of canned, ready to go response or statement. And you just gave a great example of one of those right there, right? Like
Yeah,
I used, my mom's living with Alzheimer's disease. She's having a tough moment here.
that's so
Apologies.
good, man. I
Like
really love that.
just honest, forward, straightforward, but just say it and be done with it. It was like it's more than just like you were saying at the beginning. There's sort of a cascade of positive, subtle but positive impact for
Yeah.
us as caregivers just by having that in the situation. It sort of it can sort of stop the momentum or the pattern that you were talking about of those heightened emotions, can help like serve people's appetite for curiosity, like,
Yeah.
and then maybe if they're staring, lots of good can come out of just a simple statement like that.
And I would make it super simple just like you did. "She's having a hard time, Alzheimer's," or "This is dementia, my apologies."
Yeah.
Whatever it is, don't go into big explanations.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary, but I would also bring up the point that there are cards out there, dementia companion cards or Alzheimer's please be patient cards that you can
Yeah.
get online, very handy to have. If you wanna be very discreet, you can, pass that along to a waitress or someone.
I love it. And then, okay, so one other we had on the list that can be, it can be hard to think about, but stepping away, consider stepping away. Like if you
Mhm,
need a moment to take those breaths or gather
mhm.
yourself. Um, my
Yeah.
first thought when I hear that is, well, how could I leave the situation continuing to unfold, or how could I leave my mom?
Well, you certainly wanna make sure she's safe, and it would be great if there's another person there to help you and hand it off, but you redirect, get them to a safe place, see if you could just even if it's just turning away and taking those 3 deep breaths, anything you can do to give yourself that break, and even if it's just soften your forehead, lower your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and then remember, it's not them, it's the condition. I mean, if that's all you do, that's something that's really powerful.
Love it. Helpful. And then the last one that we wanted to bring up is, and this takes a little bit of sort of advanced planning, I guess, or maybe it just comes with repetition, but having a safe space in mind, right? Where you
Mhm.
can, usher your loved one into, that's maybe out of public view, or maybe. So anyway, this does take in a little advanced planning, but like if you like to go to the same restaurant because your loved one likes it, or in my case, like actually it turned out after the fourth or fifth time that we had something happen at the thrift store that I was mentioning, there was this little alcove there, and they got less and less because we knew the people there. But I would take my mom sometimes into the alcove with,
Perfect.
the shirt that she didn't want to let go of, that we weren't going to buy. But having that, doing a little advanced recon
I
just
would
to,
say that you could even do that in the moment. If you walk
yeah.
into a new place, just scan the room. See what your options are. See where the exit is. See if there's some place you could go down a hallway. It'll give you peace of mind knowing that you have these options in the
Yeah,
moment.
I'm so glad you said peace of mind, because I was just going to mention that. Like, it's not, you don't always have to use it, right? It's but just knowing that it's there, and knowing that you did the like the recon, just the quick scan, like in your mentioning, like very, just the peace of mind that comes with that is just really, really welcoming. Not to mention, and we talk a lot on these sessions about confidence, but this is another subtle, really subtle example of something that you're doing in the course of caring for your loved one that should give you confidence. Like, that is a win. That is an accomplishment. To just
Mhm.
know when you're walking in somewhere, if it's for the first time, that you're doing a quick scan and trying to check out where you might be able to take the person you're caring for if you have some sort of issue, right? Like that is a really, really awesome move. Like, that you're
It's a
doing for
sense of
your loved one, you're
control.
doing for yourself.
Yep.
So, like, and you were just saying sense of control. Yes, like peace. Like, there's benefit in that to us as caregivers. Like, it's just a little thing, but I wanted to mention. So, time flies when we're having fun, Sheila. We're at the
Yep.
bottom of the hour. I was scanning. I didn't see any questions or come in, but I am going to just drop this article into the chat here for people. This article it's from the Carallel app. It's a gifted article. Whether you have access to Carallel or not, you'll be able to see it. But it outlines a lot of the tips we just talked about here in today's session. So, Sheila, as I'm pulling up the details for next month's caregiver conversation, what are your parting thoughts here?
I think we talked about staying calm, find some ways to redirect, and come up with some self care ways that you could either through breathing or some kind of relaxation or a mantra. And then for planning ahead, we've got a canned statement, we've got cards, and we've got a safe place to go if you need it.
Love it. And I would just say, there's no, like I guess I say this often, but it's true. That's why I say it. But you're doing the best you can. There's no way, like snap of the finger way, for us to make a situation like the ones we've been talking about today easy. It just, they're impossibly taxing emotionally, sometimes physically, and we all just do the best we can to muddle through. The tips that Sheila just recapped, and what we've talked about here, each one can help just a little bit, but the cumulative effect of those little bits, they can make a meaningful impact and make that trip out to lunch, or that trip to the thrift store, or the trip to go to mass or to synagogue, whatever it might be. Like, they can make it just a little bit easier. So hopefully you found it helpful. So we'll be looking forward. I just dropped the link to register into the chat as well. And thank you, everybody, for being here. You're doing an amazing job, and we'll see you again soon.
Take good care.
Bye now.